All right, today we're going to talk about solving nonlinear systems of equations. Well, you've already solved linear systems, so what are some of the methods that you use to solve those equations? Well, you can solve them by graphing, you could solve by substitution, or elimination, sometimes called the addition method. All right, so let's try and do these same exact methods with nonlinear systems. So here's an example that we'll be using, and we'll solve this in 3 different ways. All right, let's start by solving by graphing. So in order to put this in your y editor, you need to solve each equation for y. So I solved the first equation for y and the second equation for y. Now I'm just going to put this in y1 and y2 into my calculator. I'm going to find a nice window for this, and then I'm going to find the intersection. So this here is what the graph would look like, and you can see that there are 2 solutions for this. There would be one here and one here. That's where the red line intersects the parabola. I'm just going to use the second calc and number 5 for intersection to find the value of those 2 intersections. The first one I have x is 2, y is -3. And this one up here I have x is 4, y is 3. So notice that these equations now have 2 solutions, both solutions having both an x and a y solution. All right, let's take the same system and solve it by substitution. When you're solving by substitution, you want to look for an equation that has one variable that has a coefficient of either 1 or -1 and is a linear term, so it's not an x squared or a higher power. So if I look at the first equation, x squared equals 2y plus 10, the x squared is squared, so that wouldn't work. The 2y has a 2 in front of it, so that wouldn't work. So let's look at the next equation. Well, 3x has a 3 in front of it, but that y has just a negative sign, so that would be a good one to solve for. So let's take that second equation and solve it for y. So I get y equals 3x minus 9. Now I'm going to take that equation and substitute it into the first equation. And now all I have to do is solve for x. So I'm going to distribute, combine my like terms. At this point, I'm going to look at it like I would look at any quadratic and think about what method would be the best method to solve. I could solve by factoring. I could solve by the quadratic formula. I could solve by completing the square. Solve by square rooting would not be a good candidate for this one. But it looks like it factors pretty easily. And so now I have my answers x equals 4 or x equals 2. But don't forget this next step, because this is the step that kids forget. You now have to go back in and solve for y, right? So the fact that you have 2 x's is great, but remember you also have 2 y variables that you need to solve for. So you can pick either equation. I tend to pick the simpler of the 2. So I'm going to plug 4 in for x and solve this one, and then I'm going to plug 2 in for x and solve for y. So I get y equals 3 and y equals -3. So my solutions are 4, 3 or 2, -3. Same solutions we got with graphing. All right, now let's solve by elimination. So the first thing you want to do is you want to put both equations in standard form. So the first equation be x squared minus 2y equals 10, and the second one is already in standard form. I'm going to eliminate one variable. Well, it looks, if I take a look at these 2 equations, it looks like the easiest one to eliminate would be my y's. So if I take my second equation and multiply it by -2, then I would eliminate my y's. Now that I have a -2y and a +2y, you can see that they would cancel out. So now I'm just going to add these 2 equations. X squared minus 6x equals -8. I'm going to add the 8 to both sides, and I'm going to solve for x. Once again, I get x equals 2 or x equals 4. I'm not going to forget that I also need to solve for y. Again, I could use either equation. I tend to use the simpler of the 2. I'm going to plug in 4 and 2, and I will get 4, 3 or 2, -3. So you can see that these different methods are easier for different equations depending on what you are given. So if you have any questions on this, let me know.